How can somebody be so helpful and so sinister at the same time? How can somebody be in love with a woman but treat her that way? How could a wife let a husband act that way towards a woman? These are all the reasons that women choose the bear instead of the man in the woods. So today we're playing a game. We're going to play 2 truths and a lie. You guys loved the last time we did this, so I thought we should do it again. The goal of today's episode is for you to decipher which one of these 3 stories is fictional. I'm going to tell 2 absolutely true horrifying stories and 1 fictional horrifying story. And it's your job to tell me in the comments what clues you're picking up and what conclusions you're coming to. And you have to guess which one is fictional as it's going. I'm going to reveal it at the end, but don't jump till the end. Play the game. You're not going to be able to look this up on the internet. I'm changing all the names of the true stories, so don't even try to do that. Don't even try to cheat. Just have some fun. And the theme of today's episode is the reason women are choosing the bear. If you guys have seen that trend, there was a question proposed to women. Would you rather be alone in the woods with a man or a bear? And almost all of the women chose the bear and confused men nationwide. But these stories are the reason women choose the bear. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Enjoy the show. So this girl Amy was a critical care nurse, and she typically worked the night shift at this hospital in New Jersey. Amy was a super dedicated and passionate nurse. She really loved what she did. When somebody is truly passionate about what they do, it's just contagious, and the people that are in that profession with them just love them. And Amy had the perfect characteristics to become a nurse. She was extremely nurturing and protective over her patients. She took a lot of pride in taking care of them to the best of her ability. Outside of her profession, Amy was also a single mother to 2 beautiful young girls. And even though Amy was a fantastic nurturer and a great mom, and she really loved her daughters, balancing working the night shift and raising 2 young kids is very difficult for anybody, and she was struggling with it. She'd be working extremely long hours just on her feet for hours at a time, and this would wear anybody down. Not to mention, when her shifts would end and she would finally get to come home, her babysitter would be getting her young girls ready for school. So whenever she would come home ready to spend a little bit of time with her kids before she finally got some sleep, they'd be out the door already. You could only imagine how hard this is on the mother and the children, because both of them want to be around each other more. It definitely causes stress in the relationship that I have to be at work and you have to be at school, and our schedules are completely opposite. Not to mention, she is the only parent and she has to provide for them. So she has no choice but to work these night shifts. There's no other provider in this house. And on top of all of that, Amy started to suffer from a heart condition. She had cardiomyopathy. So anytime Amy would try to physically exert herself, her heart would start racing, she'd be out of breath, she'd start having a major panic attack. There was almost nothing that she could do. And this would happen at work constantly. If she had to start giving chest compressions to a suffering patient, she would start losing her breath herself. Or if she had to roll a patient over to wash their back or anything of that nature, anything that was physically strenuous, she would start freaking out and her heart would start freaking out. And Amy was hiding a very big secret. She actually needed a heart transplant, but she couldn't tell any of the people that she worked with, her bosses or anything like that, because she would be laid off. But she needed her medical coverage to kick in so she could actually pay for this heart transplant. So Amy had to find the strength to not only be a single mother working the night shift, but she had to find the strength to work through a heart condition and keep this secret to herself, just holding the entire world on her shoulders. But one night, as Amy was starting her shift, she was informed that a new nurse was starting his first shift this night. This was music to Amy's ears because she desperately needed the help. They were understaffed, there was not many night nurses, and she was just so excited that somebody was here to help her. So Amy rushes over to the new nurse and introduces herself to him because she's so excited. He happens to be named Charlie. And Amy and Charlie immediately have chemistry. They start hitting it off. First day they work together, she loves Charlie. He was an amazing teammate. He was so helpful every single night. He was positive, he had good banter, he was just a good dude to be around, and Amy really enjoyed his help. Not to mention, he was a fantastic nurse. Charlie was extremely friendly and caring and knowledgeable and was always there to make Amy laugh when she was having a hard night. He was a godsend. And Amy loved Charlie. She really loved having him around. She had this small inkling that Charlie was picked on when he was a kid. She could just tell that he went through some childhood stuff. She could sense that small bit of brokenness inside of him, that his innocence was actually gone even though he steps up to make everybody laugh and smile. And after she came to that conclusion about Charlie, that she didn't really know was true or not, she just came to that conclusion herself, she felt the moral obligation to step up for Charlie and always protect him from everything. And as you could expect, because of Charlie's friendly nature and Amy's want to protect him, they started hitting it off right away. They weren't just coworkers, they were really good friends. And after a few weeks of them getting closer and closer, finally Amy had one of her episodes where her heart was just going crazy and she couldn't control it. And she's trying to hide it from everybody, but Charlie saw it. Amy did her best to excuse herself from that situation. She wasn't even ready to tell Charlie about this. She didn't want to tell anybody. So she goes into a room by herself and her heart's pounding. She can't breathe. The situation is getting worse and worse. And luckily, Charlie followed her into that room and asks her what's wrong. And initially, Amy doesn't even want to tell Charlie, but he was so nice and made her so comfortable. She finally fessed up and admitted to Charlie that she was struggling with this major heart condition. And while Charlie is trying to console her and helping her breathe through this major episode, she is just trying to communicate to him that he needs to keep this secret. She didn't even want him focusing on the fact that she was in serious pain right now. She needed him to understand that he cannot tell a soul about this. And Charlie heard her loud and clear. He really liked Amy. They were really good friends. And from that moment on, he became Amy's support system. He was on her team. She wasn't in this alone anymore. He was ready to support her through this process. Amy was so comforted by having somebody else on her team, it made the next few months go by like a breeze. She had a support system finally. But with this major heart condition, she's bound to have another episode. And when she finally did, something very interesting happened. So during this particular episode, her heart rate raised to about 180, and she was having a very hard time controlling this one. And just like every other time, Amy excused herself from the situation so she could go gather herself in private where nobody could see her. But Charlie, again, he was always looking out for Amy. So he saw her excuse herself. He followed her, he started checking on her, seeing if she was okay, and he thought that she should probably go to the ER for this one. But Amy refused. She could not let anybody know about this. She had to keep this a secret. But she had 3 patients that she had to take care of that night. She couldn't just leave. If she left right now, she would lose her job for sure. And that's when Charlie nodded his head, left the room, came back a couple moments later with some cardizem in his hand. Charlie left the room to go get some medication that he knew would help her in that moment, and Amy didn't even bother questioning him. She just popped it, and it did help. It really helped her, and she got through the night. This is the level of trust that she built with this guy. They were really that close of friends that he hands her pills, she trusts him, she pops it. And Charlie even stepped up and took care of all of her patients that night and did all of her paperwork. He did double the work to make sure that Amy was okay. And up until this point, let me know in the comments, Charlie sounds like an awesome guy, right? He seems like the best friend anybody could ask for. But something very strange started to happen once he started working at that hospital. They started having multiple codes a night. If you don't know what a code is, it basically means somebody starts dying. And unfortunately, stuff like that happens at hospitals. But for some reason, once he entered the team, the rate of codes on a nightly basis raised significantly. It would happen multiple times a night where a patient that was completely okay, was recovering and getting better, and was probably going to be discharged within the next few days, would radically decline, and they would just go into a code and pass away out of nowhere. And the staff would be so confused and devastated because they knew they did a great job taking care of this person. They looked like they were getting better, and then out of nowhere, they would just go downhill. And this is where things get even weirder. When the patients that were deceased would go under testing to see what caused them to pass away, their tests would come up positive for insulin and digoxin. If you don't know what digoxin is, they use it to treat heart failure. It basically strengthens your heart's contractions. It just makes it pump harder. But as that rate starts to get higher and higher, your heart rate will slow down and eventually you just die. And absolutely, some of these patients were taking that medication for their hearts. But according to the records, the levels of digoxin in their blood were continuously increasing even after they haven't received any digoxin for days. And the even weirder one was the insulin. They would check these patients who weren't receiving insulin, they weren't diabetic, they would have passed away from hypoglycemia. You use insulin to treat your blood sugar level as a diabetic, but if somebody isn't a diabetic, they don't need insulin. Why would they have it? And as those incidents started piling up, this caused an internal investigation to ensue inside of this hospital, and 2 detectives started working the case, Detective Tim and Detective Danny. And on the first day of these detectives' investigation, they received a minuscule folder of information from the hospital. They were expecting a big binder or a full box of files for them to sift through to get any information that could possibly be important, but they just received a little tiny file with borderline no information. And inside of this folder was a small document written up by one of the hospital's attorneys. And there was no information in there. It was like the smallest amount of information that the hospital could legally fork over. So the detectives are looking through this minuscule document, and the only thing that draws any of their attention is that Charlie's name is mentioned in it. And they're like, why is this guy's name mentioned in this document, but no evidence of any foul play? So they look into Charlie, and he's the only nurse on staff that has a criminal record. And the detectives find out that Charlie was arrested twice for drunk driving and criminal trespassing. So Detective Tim is starting to look into Charlie. He's making a few calls. He's trying to get a little bit of dirt on this guy. And he's on the phone with the clerk trying to get more information about Charlie. And the clerk lets the detective know that there's a little post-it note on Charlie's file. And on this post-it note, it indicated that the Pennsylvania police were also investigating Charlie about the same things. So there has to be something weird about Charlie, because multiple detectives from multiple areas are looking into him for the same thing. So as Charlie's becoming a focal point of Tim and Danny's case, they start interviewing his family members. They're trying to get as much information as possible. And they come to find out that Charlie is a very smart individual, extremely intelligent, and he's also a great loving father. But as they continue to look into him, they find out that Charlie couldn't keep a job. He worked at 9 different hospitals and a nursing home. And they also found out that Charlie had been known to abuse family pets and was even accused of poisoning the family dog. And on top of all of that, the detectives found out about one specific incident at one of the hospitals that he worked at. So at one of the hospitals that he worked at, there was this one patient that went through a procedure and she was recovering just fine. They were ready to send her to rehab. They were ready to discharge her. She was about to be on her way home. And this patient was just getting ready to be discharged, and their son came to visit them in the hospital. And while the son was there, a male nurse came into the room and asked the son to leave. And the male nurse pulled the curtain all the way around the patient, and the son went to the nursing center just to wait. And then he heard his mom yell, "Ouch." So the son immediately barges back into the area, and the male nurse runs out the other side of the curtain, and the mom tells her son that nurse just poked me with a needle. And the son whips out his Swiss Army knife that has a little magnifying glass on it and goes and looks at the point that she says, he poked me right here, and he sees a little dot of blood. And there's clearly an entry point from a needle. But nothing happened in that exact moment. Later that day, they took that patient and they transported her to rehab. And the son went home to get his mom's favorite slippers before picking her up from rehab. And then he gets a call from the hospital. His mother had passed away after not even 5 minutes of being at the rehab center. And that son believed that that nurse that he saw gave his mother a lethal injection. So the hospital had to do a toxicology report, and they tested this woman for everything other than digoxin. So there were suspicions that it was Charlie because he was one of the only nurses working that was a male that night, but there was no proof that any foul play happened. Now I want to take it back to Amy. Obviously these things are happening, people are noticing them, but Amy is protective over Charlie. Charlie is really good to her. So she is scoffing at any allegations towards Charlie. She is in full protection mode. But that's until she starts putting things together. Everybody at the hospital was aware that there was an internal investigation going on. And Amy was starting to question things a little bit. And Charlie had mentioned previously that he had worked with one of the nurses that Amy had trained. So they had a mutual friend. So Amy decided to get lunch with this nurse to get a little bit more information on Charlie. And she hadn't seen this woman in like 10 years. So they get lunch together and they're doing a little bit of small talk. But Amy kind of wants to get to the meat and potatoes of this conversation and ask this woman if she knows Charlie. And this woman is clearly uncomfortable from this question. And she's looking around and she looks at Amy and she's like, "Yeah, I know him." And then she starts telling her that there's rumors about Charlie. People talk about him. People have suspicions about him. People think that he was going around the hospital basically executing patients. She said that once he started working there, they would get 5 to 6 codes a night. But once he left, once he was kicked out of that hospital, they would get 1 a month. And Amy is absolutely shocked to hear this. This man has been so sweet to her, but that's exactly what's been happening at her hospital. And this part is very important. This woman goes on to tell Amy that they had found insulin in one of the expired IV bags after Charlie left. And at that moment, it all clicked for Amy because she was denying it to herself because all the patients that had passed randomly, Charlie was nowhere near them. But if there was just insulin in their IV bags, things are adding up. If he had been tampering with the saline bags before they were put out by other nurses to the patients' rooms, that's how he was killing them. So Amy immediately starts freaking out because she's thinking there's a whole load of saline bags tainted with insulin in this hospital right now. Somebody might die right now. So she had to run to the hospital and up all the stairs with her heart condition, which she should not have been doing, but she couldn't help but to rush to the hospital. People's lives were in stake, and she didn't want to be caught checking because she still felt internally protective over Charlie. She didn't want it to be true. So she just sneaks into the room where they store the saline bags, and she's just grabbing them and giving them a little squeeze to see if any of them have a hole poked in them. And she's just squeezing them one by one until finally one shoots out some saline out of a clear injection hole. And you would only know that this saline bag was tampered with if you squeezed it hard enough. And at that moment, Amy started falling apart. She knew that what this woman told her was most likely true, and her friend that she had gotten so close with was actually a monster. How could somebody be such a good, caring person while simultaneously just giving out random executions? It doesn't make sense. And then one final incident happened that Amy actually witnessed that just broke the camel's back. Amy walked in on a patient that was going into VTAC, and she called out code blue to all the other nurses. She saw all these indications on her monitor. She wasn't even in the room when she called the code blue. So she rushes over to the room, and when she enters this room, she sees Charlie injecting this patient with something. So she asked Charlie, "What are you giving this patient right now? Why are you even giving this patient something?" And he just replies, "I'm giving them lidocaine." And she thought for a second, why would you give them lidocaine? But she didn't second guess him, because at that moment, other staff members were arriving and rushing into the room, giving this patient CPR. It was a crazy time. And they start giving this patient CPR as the lidocaine is still being administered. And during this whole process, eventually the resident doctor comes in and he needs to be told what is going on. He needs to get up to date with what's happening with this patient. And Amy is technically in charge of this patient and has to brief him. So she's telling him everything that has went on up to this point. She's saying that I noticed something odd on the charts, and then we administered lidocaine, then we started giving CPR. And the doctor looks at her and is like, "Who gave this patient lidocaine?" And Amy covered for Charlie. She said, "I did. I gave them lidocaine. I'm the code leader. I made the decisions here. I administered lidocaine." And the doctor looks Amy in the face and says, "This patient's allergic to lidocaine." So Charlie was completely aware that this patient would have adverse reactions to administering lidocaine and would most likely die. And there he was, just injecting them with it. And even though Amy saw him doing it, she didn't question it at that moment, because Charlie's known for knowing medication so well. He's rumored to be super intellectual and an encyclopedia of medications. And at that point, Amy became absolutely terrified of Charlie. She doesn't want to be anywhere near him, but they were so close that she doesn't want to make it so obvious that she's terrified of him, because she doesn't know what he's capable of. She wanted to cut Charlie out of her life completely. She realized that she had met a monster in her life, but it was a very hard decision because Charlie was so helpful towards her. But even though Charlie helped her so much, morally, she had to give him up. She had to go to the detectives and give them as much information as she possibly could. And this is very important for you to know. All of the hospitals that he had been to and worked at knew what was going on. They knew what he did. They just fired him, but they weren't willing to take the hit to their reputation by letting it become public. Every hospital knew what was up with Charlie. They look at the data. They see what's in the toxicology report. They see this guy, when he came, people start dying. And when he left, nobody died anymore. So they were completely aware of what he was doing, but they were just trying to cover their own butts. These hospitals had to do everything in their power to refrain this information from getting to the public to maintain their reputation. And they did that by making their employee contracts as meticulous as possible, so none of the employees could speak out or even go to the authorities to give them information. The risk manager and the attorney of Amy's hospital tried so hard to not let this information get out about Charlie that they told all of their employees to not even entertain conversations with the detectives, and she even went to Amy personally and said, "Don't talk to them. Don't give them information." They were okay with what Charlie was doing as long as the reputation of the hospital maintained. And to shut the investigation down completely, they, just like the other hospitals, found a little petty reason to fire Charlie. So they're done and dusted. They have nothing to do with him. Their reputation's fine, but he could just go find a nursing job somewhere else and continue doing what he's doing. So now Charlie is completely free. He's a free agent to go to any hospital in the country. Nobody said he did anything bad. There's rumors, but there's no proof, and he's just going to move on to his next hospital and continue his killing spree. But the detectives and Amy were not going to let that happen. This is where this was going to stop. The detectives had Amy plan a lunch with Charlie, and they had her wear a wire to get any morsel of evidence, any slight confession, so they could actually make an arrest. And even though they didn't get a confession from Charlie during that lunch, it didn't actually work. He did let her know that he had already gotten a new job at a hospital and was working a shift that night. The detectives were not going to let that happen. They immediately call the police that are in the area of the new hospital, and they tell them to look out for Charlie and make an arrest if you see him. And once they had Charlie in custody and started interrogating him, he wasn't immediately open to confessing, but eventually, after the hours went on, he started fessing up a little bit. and he eventually admitted to 29 murders. But when you actually look into the case, it's very possible the number of murders is closer to 400. Charlie was arguably one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, and he was a nurse. Charlie mentioned in his confessions he was doing this to put patients out of their misery, but like I mentioned earlier, most of these patients were recovering and ready to go home, and he was still doing it. So that does not add up, Charlie. You could tell he was trying to rationalize with himself to convince himself that what he was doing was righteous and he was doing the right thing. But it wasn't. But he kept just doing it over and over again. And when they asked him what was going on, like, why did you continue? He just replied, because no one ever stopped me. And that's why you choose the bear. So this story follows this girl named Noah. She's a laid-back girl, and she had some trouble dating in the past, but she wanted to give dating another try. And she decided that she wanted to start using dating apps, but she didn't really like them, but she knew it was kind of her only option in this day and age. She didn't like the fact that you just have to do these surface level texts back and forth that immediately escalate into some sexually driven weird conversation. Almost every interaction that she has on these apps makes her want to delete the app altogether. But even though she hadn't had much success in the past on these apps, she had been single for quite a long time at this point, so it was kind of her only option, and she was feeling like she really wanted a partner. So she narrows it down and she decides to go on her first date in a while, with this guy named Chad. And as most girls do, they call their best friend before they go on dates just to let them know what they're doing. But also, she wanted to complain a little bit to her best friend named Molly that she didn't particularly want to go on this date. And the reasoning that she didn't really want to go on this date is because about an hour before she was supposed to meet him at this restaurant, Chad told her that she had to bring cash because the restaurant that they're going to only accepts cash. So you need to bring cash. Odd start. And Noah didn't mind doing this. There's nothing wrong with splitting the check on the first date. They were just laughing about how forward he was about her bringing her own money to pay for her own food. But that wasn't the only reason Noah wasn't thrilled about the date. There were other red flags. She just didn't have that high of hopes in online dating in general. But she was hungry and she was already in the restaurant's parking lot, so she thought she might as well go through with it. And the restaurant of choice was this Chinese spot that Chad said that he really liked. And once she was in there, the majority of the date, this guy was just talking at her. He wasn't trying to have a conversation. He's just talking at this girl. He left no room for her to butt into the conversation. He was just getting his narration out, and she just took the opportunity to enjoy her meal and tune him out. But eventually, he ran out of gas and he stopped talking about himself for 1 second, and in that brief moment, he started to talk about Noah's appearance in a very rude way. Even though he tried to cover it up by acting as if he was speaking generally. He tells her that he's noticed that the women of his parents' generation used to put way more effort in their appearance when they were going on dates. Basically saying, doesn't look like you put much effort in tonight. And he started listing stuff. They used to put their hair up, wear dresses, do makeup, and then he gestures at her outfit and her makeup and her hair as if she didn't do any of that. He continued by mentioning how women these days just wear oversized everything, just baggy clothes. He even mentioned, and I quote, they walk around looking frumpy and unkempt. While he's looking at Noah, as she's wearing an oversized sweater and baggy jeans, basically talking about her. Noah's just sitting there. She's pretty much checked out of this date already, just enjoying her chow mein, when he finishes his thought by telling her that she would look great in a dress. And as you could imagine, Noah was ready to get out of there. Chad was not her cup of tea. And on top of his lecture about how women should act on dates and everything that they're not bringing to the table these days, he conveniently forgot his wallet and his cash when he conveniently reminded Noah to bring cash, and she ended up paying for the entire date. And he also shoveled all of his leftovers and all of her leftovers into a little goodie bag to bring home for his family. Noah just smiled and nodded her head and was ready for this date to end. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She didn't want to be here in the first place. She was just ready to leave. So she pays the bill, they leave the restaurant, and as they're parting ways out front, just saying their awkward goodbyes from a horrible date, Chad goes, I had a great time, we should do this again. While he was intruding her personal space, leaning in as if he thought this date went so well that it was going to end with a little kiss. And right then, Noah puts her hands up and she's like, hey, this was a little bit of a different experience for me than it was for you, clearly. I don't think we're a good match. She was polite about it, but Chad did not take it well. He immediately snaps at Noah and just goes, I was being nice. He changes his tune right away, and then he starts saying, well, I thought the date was horrible. I didn't have a good time. After he got rejected for a kiss, then he storms away like a little brat and says, have fun trying to find a man, you stuck up. Crazy behavior coming from Chad. Imagine being Noah. going on the first date in about 10 years and you get Chad. She was too stunned to speak, but she goes on with her life, and the next day she enjoyed a boxing class with her friend Molly, and she's telling her all about it. They were just laughing about it, his tantrum, his weird scarf that he was wearing during the date that I didn't mention that kept falling into his food while he was eating. They were just making light of a horrible dating situation and were bonding together as friends. And of course, Molly, being her best friend, is trying to cheer Noah up because the dating scene has been super rough for her. And obviously, you don't want to see your friends give up hope and just be alone. So later that same day, Noah didn't have the leftovers from the restaurant, so she was a little bit hungry at night with nothing to eat, so she decided to go to the grocery store to pick up some food for herself. But before getting into all the aisles, she goes straight to the produce section and she's just looking over all of the options. And as she's scanning the vegetables, the cabbages, the zucchinis, the eggplants, a man approaches her. She was initially a little standoffish because she was just there to get some groceries, and she just had that horrible experience like 10 minutes ago. Her intention of going to the grocery store wasn't to chat with a random dude in the produce section, but this guy was super interested in her. He was making corny jokes about the cotton candy grapes that he was buying, and he was just taking every excuse that he could find to try to talk to her. But this guy was pretty nice, so Noah started engaging in his banter a little bit, and they had a nice little back and forth. So a few minutes go by, they crack a couple jokes to each other, and eventually this guy introduces himself as Steve. But after a couple more corny jokes, he bashfully excuses himself and just tells Noah that it was nice to meet her. But just as quickly as he turned around, he turned back around and was like, "I'm not done. I'm trying to chat you up, Noah." And this time Steve got right to it and asked for her number. He wasn't messing around. He was still throwing some corny jokes around, but his playfulness really loosened her up, and she just gave him her number. And the next day when she met up with her friend Molly again, she told her about this interaction because she was super excited about it, because Steve wasn't horrible like Chad. She was saying things like, "I didn't even know that you could actually meet people in person anymore. Who meets somebody in a produce section or a coffee shop or a bookstore? That's like a love movie." And by love movie, I mean a romance, and I said that wrong. And she was just going on and on to Molly about how funny and cute he was and how actually tasty cotton candy grapes are. She's not lying. All of it sounded too good to be true, so naturally Molly goes, "I think he's married," and they both have a good laugh about it. The only thing that was bothering Noah up to this point, because she was pretty happy about that interaction, was pretty excited about Steve, it was the fact that he hadn't texted her yet and it had been a full day. So she's just waiting around, doesn't have his number, and she's just wondering, maybe he didn't like me that much after all. Maybe he was just trying to get out of his shell and just see if he could get a girl's number, boost his self-confidence. And she expresses these concerns to Molly, and Molly immediately says, "You just gotta focus on yourself. Don't play these games that all these guys want to play. That's why I switched to women." Molly was sick of these guys. She just found herself a queen. But later that day, like clockwork, Steve shoots a little text and asks Noah to go out that night. And obviously, Noah's into Steve, so she immediately agrees, and they meet up at a local bar. So they get there and they order their first round of drinks, and they just start the first round of introductory questions. You know, all the little boring ones you got to get out of the way before you can actually talk about the real stuff. Where are you from? How's the weather? What do you do for work? All that stuff. Noah tells Steve that she's from the East Coast, and Steve is like, "Oh, that's cool. I'm from Texas." And he goes on to tell her that he moved to Portland for his second residency, implying man's a doctor. And to be more specific, Steve is a plastic surgeon. But you could tell that Steve was a little bit insecure about it because of all of the negative connotations that come with plastic surgery. So he was trying to rebrand it as reconstructive surgery. Noah was just being playful. She didn't want Steve to feel insecure about it, so she was just joking about butt lifts and nose jobs and facelifts and things of that nature. But Steve took a little serious note to it and was like, "There are real benefits to this. I actually did a full face reconstruction on a young boy that just had a car accident." Noah immediately apologized because she wasn't sure if her jokes were in poor taste, but Steve took it well. He knows the connotation that comes with being a plastic surgeon, and it wasn't the first time he heard it, and he liked Noah. He thought it was funny. So they kept this conversation going in a very upbeat manner. They were genuinely hitting it off. So Steve asked Noah about her family, and Noah tells Steve that she actually doesn't have any siblings, and her parents had passed away a little while ago, so she was actually completely alone, which is not something you should really share with a stranger, being a woman alone in a city. Steve tries to make Noah feel comfortable because she was just vulnerable with him, so he shares that his dad still lives in Texas, but his mother passed away. So not only do they have good banter, they're starting to connect now on having similar family dynamics. And this date was totally different than her date with Chad. Everything that Chad brought to the table was horrible. Everything that Steve brought to the table was great. They were completely polar opposite dynamics. These two were laughing and flirting, getting a little bit tipsy, enjoying each other's company, a little too much if you know what I'm saying. So eventually their date comes to an end, and Noah starts expressing that she really doesn't like the process of dating and first dates and second dates and getting to know each other and just this whole awkward process that leads into eventually finding a good partner. But you have to go through that process to find a partner. And she's standing out front of this restaurant and she's looking at Steve and she's like, "Man, I really like this guy, and I think I need to tell him that. But she didn't have the words to describe how she was feeling, so she went and gave him a little smooch to let him know how she was feeling on the inside. And like I said, they were a little tipsy at this point. They're feeling a little carefree, a little rambunctious, if you will, and they decided to go back to Noah's apartment together. So things are getting a little hot and heavy, but Steve puts a halt to it right as things are getting good, and he just says, I think we're moving too fast. Noah is so surprised to hear that because she's never heard a man talk like that before. Naturally, she feels a little bit embarrassed because she thinks she's being a little bit too forward, making him feel uncomfortable, so she just goes immediately into host mode and asks if he wants anything to drink or eat. And Steve looks this girl right in the eye and replies, no, just you. And I think you can guess what happened next. Things picked back up. They ended up having a superb night together, very mutually beneficial night, and they actually really enjoyed their time together and really liked each other. When Noah woke up, she decided to take a little picture of Steve while he was still sleeping. One, to remember the moment because she really liked this guy, and two, to let Molly know that she sealed the deal. So later that day, when she's filling in Molly with how her date went, initially, Molly is super excited for her. And they're just chatting about how Noah felt so free with him and how the date felt just so lively, and she was just felt like she was going with the flow and just how well it went. And then Molly asked Noah for his Instagram because she wants to do a little snooping. She wants a little bit more details on Magical Steve, but Noah tells her that Steve doesn't have an Instagram. He actually doesn't have any social media whatsoever. Molly immediately changed her tune and goes, I don't know, no social medias whatsoever is a little bit of a red flag to me. And Noah reassured her that there was really nothing to worry about. He just wasn't that type of guy. He didn't like being on the internet like that. She just immediately changed the subject because you could tell that she didn't want any negativity around her and Steve at that moment. She really, really liked him and she didn't want to think of any red flags. So she changed the subject to tell Molly that one of her ex-boyfriends was their bartender the night before at their date. So I just want you to keep that into account because now Molly knows that one of her exes, who she has a pretty decent relationship with, like she could text him, he has seen Steve before. So even though he doesn't have any social media, Molly knows somebody who knows what Steve looks like. So after that conversation, Molly knew that her ex knows what Steve looks like, but she doesn't have enough details for herself. She isn't satisfied with how much she knows about her new friend's mysterious new boyfriend. But being the good friend that she is, she's just trying to be happy for Noah anyway, even though she's seeing a little bit of red flags in this. So the next day comes and Steve and Noah have dinner at Noah's place again, and they're just eating takeout and having another really great date. So they're eating their takeout and Noah is just running through these short ribs. It's her favorite short ribs from her favorite place, and she's trying to share it with Steve. You know, they're really liking each other. She wants to share the things that she loves with this guy that she really likes, and she tries to get him to eat a little bit of this short rib. But Steve goes, no, sorry, I didn't tell you this. I actually don't eat animals. And I'll repeat that once for you. He doesn't eat animals. They just had a good laugh about it. Noah felt a little bit uncomfortable that she was forcing meat into somebody's face that doesn't eat meat, but they changed the subject and they're having a good time again. Steve actually asked Noah if she's told anybody about him, because Steve knows that she doesn't have any family, but he's trying to gauge who in her life knows about him. And Noah tells him that she told her best friend Molly about it. And she goes on to tell him about Molly, how they've been friends for 7 years, and they worked together around the time that Noah moved there, and they really, really hit it off, and they've been best friends ever since. So Steve starts asking her what she told Molly about him, and he wants to know a little bit more about Molly. He's pressing her a little bit for a little bit of information about Molly. But Noah kept it really simple. She just told Steve that she told Molly, I met a cool guy, and kept it easy. And the conversation got a little bit awkward after that. It was the first time there was a little bit of awkward tension in any of their interactions. But Steve saved the situation by asking her if she wanted to dance. So they got up and started dancing together, and everything is just kind of fixed, and they're having a good time again. And when they finish dancing and they're done goofing around, Steve looks at Noah and says, we should go away somewhere. Noah didn't answer immediately because, first of all, that is super, super random. Because they were just being goofballs, laughing and dancing, but now Steve is dead serious, planning a little getaway vacation for them. Mind you, they're in the very beginning stages of getting to know each other. This is a major jump to go on a trip with one another. So instead of pressuring her, Steve kind of took a step back and just asked her, would you want to? In a very calm and inviting way. And since Noah did like him a lot, she was just like, you know what? Yeah, I would. Where would you want to go? And Steve just said, somewhere nice, somewhere super fun, and I want it to be a surprise. Naturally, Noah felt a little bit reluctant at first, but she was trying her best to embrace this carefree, fun relationship that they were building, and she kind of wanted to be spontaneous with him because she really liked it. So later that day, Noah reports back to Molly that she is planning on going away for the weekend with Steve. And naturally, Molly is like, hey, I was already seeing red flags in this guy just based on the brief information that you gave me. Now you're going away with this guy for a weekend? I don't think I like this for you. So Molly follows up with her friend and she's like, where is he taking you? Where are you going? And Noah doesn't have an answer. She says, he told me it was going to be a surprise. And Molly is like, put a halt to this. I don't like what I'm hearing. But Noah is telling Molly, I think I'm going to go for it. I really like this guy. You're the one that was encouraging me to start dating again and be a little bit more spontaneous. I think this could be really great. And I think I really like this guy. And Noah is a grown woman. There's nothing that Molly can do to stop Noah from going on this trip this weekend. But she just wanted to express to Noah that you haven't even introduced me to him yet. I'm the only person that would look for you if you were gone. So I would feel way more comfortable if I had seen him or if I've met him. I'm just not comfortable with this. When Noah decided to send Molly the picture of Steve that she took of him while he's sleeping. The picture was just kind of a side profile. You couldn't see his entire face, but Molly was at least a little satisfied with that. And she was like, okay, he's cute. He seems normal. You could go. Yeah, have a good time. Be careful. So the weekend comes around and Noah's pretty excited and they're on their way to wherever Steve is taking her. Noah didn't tell Steve this, but she actually hates surprises. So she's just super anxious the entire way there. So she finally asks, like, where are we going? And he tells her that they're going to Cottage Grove, which is actually somewhere that she has always wanted to go. So now she's genuinely excited for this trip. And while they're still in the car on the way to Cottage Grove, Noah is trying to send texts to Molly about where she's going because now she knows where she's going. But the messages won't send because they're on some random road in the middle of nowhere and they have absolutely no service. So she can't even let Molly know where she's at. And she brings it up to Steve like, hey, she's trying to report back to her friend. And Steve reassures her, don't worry, I have Wi-Fi at my place. I have a place near here. You could send the messages from there before we go to Cottage Grove. So apparently part of the surprise was that they were going to stay at Steve's place near Cottage Grove because if they tried to drive straight to Cottage Grove now, there would be so much traffic, so they might as well stay at his place overnight and they'll drive there together in the morning. Noah had never been to Steve's place yet. She didn't even really know where he lives. And she was a little bit excited, but his place was really in the middle of nowhere. It was really isolated. His house was the only house for a super long stretch and it was completely surrounded by woods. So they eventually get to his place and it is a pleasant surprise. This man has got a nice crib. He's a doctor after all. And the first thing that they did when they got there was have a couple drinks. Usually that would loosen them up a little bit and it would ease them into their comfortable conversations. So Steve took that opportunity to make some very old-fashioned special drinks. While Steve is making these drinks, Noah reminds him that she's trying to get some text messages out and says that, hey, the Wi-Fi is not working here either. And he just kind of brushes it off and just goes, oh, must have went out again. Just pushing it to the side. When Steve finishes making these old-fashioned drinks, he walks it over to Noah and asks her, I want you to taste this and I want you to tell me what you think the special ingredient is. So Noah is smelling the drink, taking light sips, taking bigger gulps, throwing out guesses, and each guess that she's throwing out is just wrong, and the next one's wrong, and the next one's wrong. She was guessing things like peach and apricot, and she just kept getting no's. She had to keep taking sip after sip, guess after guess. It was about 75% finished by the time she got it right, and the secret ingredient was nectarine. But at this point, Noah started feeling a bit woozy, a little bit dizzy, and she started to question if she drank this drink too fast, if he was having a heavy pour with the liquor and she might have chugged it. She was very concerned with how she was feeling in that very moment. But this strong feeling of overwhelming sedation kept getting stronger and stronger. And she's trying to compose herself because she's not trying to embarrass herself in front of Steve. She just thinks she drank this drink too fast. So she's just doing her best to stay focused. And Steve's still talking to her. And Steve asks her to come sit by him because she's too far away. But as soon as Noah stands up, she immediately recognizes that she's about to pass out and she just hits the floor. And the next thing she knows is she's just waking up in a completely different room and she has no idea what happened. But she could see that Steve is in the corner of the room that she's sitting in. So she immediately is rubbing her face, trying to get her bearings, and asks Steve what happened to her. And Steve looks this girl right in the face and says, I drugged you. Noah initially thinks that he's completely joking. She even chuckles a little bit. But then when she starts to sit up to go walk by him or embrace him or get more details about this obvious joke, she realizes that her wrist is chained to the floor. And this is when the panic really starts to set in. She starts freaking out. She starts yanking on the chain, yelling at him to take this off because she's actually starting to have a panic attack. She can't even believe that this might be reality. That this sweet man that she was really falling for would take her all the way out here, drug her, and chain her to the floor in his basement. But Steve is just being calm and sadistic and is ensuring her that this is absolutely real. I drugged you, and yes, you are chained in my basement, and you better come to terms with it. But she cannot handle it. She's freaking out. She keeps spiraling and panicking and yelling at him and yanking at this chain, and his calm, sadistic tone erupts into a violent anger, and he yells in her face to calm down, and then he calmly tells her, "I'm going to sell your meat." This man literally said, "I'm gonna sell your meat." And then he doubled down and said, "Don't even worry, because I'm not gonna assault you, I'm not gonna hurt you, I'm not gonna beat you, none of the above. I'm gonna sedate you, I'm gonna surgically remove parts of your body, and I'm gonna sell them to the elite 1% that enjoys eating human flesh." He acted as if this is no big deal. You should be relieved that I'm not gonna do all those other things to you. Don't worry, I'm just gonna sell your meat and get rich off of it from freaky elite billionaires. So Noah is trying to comprehend all of this information that she just got, and Steve finally leaves the room, so she finally is able to look around and evaluate her surroundings. And she's being held in a soundproof room in a basement that was purposely made to house abducted women and sell their body parts. And as she's sitting there trying to come to terms with her new reality, she hears somebody in the room next to her. She's not the only girl here. She immediately starts calling to the girl on the other end of this wall. She's trying to get any type of support that she can, and she finds out that the girl in the room next to her is named Peggy, and she's been here for quite a while. And Steve was not lying. He has sold Peggy's body parts. And she's basically trying to calm Noah down, just saying, this is the new reality, like just try it, try to be calm. He's not going to do anything to you other than put you out and take something off of you. So Steve wasn't this sweet, charming guy that was looking for love. He was actively trying to find women that didn't have much of a support system, get them to his house, making them think that he was in love with them or falling for them. But realistically, he was running an underground operation that was systematic and efficient for keeping women's body parts fresh. So as this reality is sinking in, Noah is obviously starting to feel depressed. She realizes that nobody's going to be looking for her. The only person that might be looking for her is Molly, and she wasn't even able to tell Molly where they actually went. But while this is happening, while Noah is just alone and secluded in this random basement, Molly is already starting to feel a little bit of concern for her friend because she's not hearing back from her. So she's blowing up Noah's phone, but then Noah starts replying in very dry, monotone texts, nothing like their usual banter. And Molly is like, this is not right. She starts to get very suspicious. Molly's not liking what she's hearing, so she tells Noah like, hey, I'm a little bit concerned. Give me some more information, girl. But Noah abruptly ends the text conversation saying, I'm turning my phone off for the weekend. Just sends her a picture of Cottage Grove and is like, bye, I'll catch you later. But Molly was not fooled by that. That turned on all of her friendship alarms. She immediately knew something is wrong here. Immediately, Molly takes the photo that Noah sent to her and cross-references it with Google, and she realizes that that photo is a stock image off Google Images. So she's right, there is something very suspicious going on here. So while Molly is on this wild goose chase trying to figure out more information for Noah, Noah is still stuck in this room, and she's talking to Peggy every day, trying to get as much information as she possibly can about this situation that she's stuck in. And if that isn't bad enough, Steve is also stopping by Noah's room constantly, as if they're still in this ongoing relationship, as if she should still be flirty and still trying to get to know him. He's acting as if he did not drug her and lock her in a basement. But naturally, Noah absolutely hates this guy at this point. Obviously, there's no scenario where you wouldn't absolutely hate this man. But this man is coming down there and flirting with her and bringing her stuff and acting as if there still might be a little fling going on here. So an entire day passes, and Noah is just stuck in this basement trying to figure out something that she could do to change her situation. And the only thing that she could come up with was telling Steve that she wanted to take a shower. And clearly, he still had a little thing for her, so she had a little bit of leverage in this conversation. So he simply removed her handcuff from the floor, cuffed her hands together, and took her up through the house so she could go take a shower. But this is where her first escape attempt happened. She was trying to stay calm and take in all of her surroundings, getting a full tour of the house. She was honestly not really trying to escape that time. She was just looking around. She wanted information, but she saw a smear of blood on the wall, and it made her absolutely panic, and she just went into fight or flight mode, knocked into Steve, and tried to run out of the house. Noah didn't make it very far. Steve immediately closed the distance and smashed her head off the wall, knocking her completely unconscious. So naturally, Steve was very upset with this. Noah tried to get away, but he seemed more angry than he should have been, because obviously your captive is going to try to get away. He felt betrayed that she had lied to him. He was acting as if they still had something going on, and she betrayed him. And he took it out on her, not in a beating, not by throwing her back in the room and locking her up. He sedated her, and he did his first procedure on her, and he took his favorite item off of her body. So when Noah wakes up from this sedation, she is trying to move, she doesn't really know what's going on, and she can tell that she can't feel the lower half of her body because he gave her an epidural. So she's just on her stomach laying on a surgical bed, and she finds out from Steve that she's currently in surgery getting her glutes removed. And this man is telling her this gruesome, horrible news as he's blasting music and singing and dancing as if he's having the time of his life. She wasn't able to maintain consciousness because of all of the panic that was going through her body. She went back out cold and woke back up in her room, chained to the floor again. And you'd think this would be the end of their fake fling in Steve's head. He just removed her butt, and he's still coming to her room, acting as if they are buddy-buddy and they still have a relationship, after he drugged her, locked her up, and took her butt. But Noah has to put up with his visits, and she starts to think of more strategic ways to either get back at him or get out of here. And she thinks, I could probably start to manipulate him, and I need to actually start talking to him and leaning in to this weird romance he thinks that we have. So she starts pretending to be interested in this weird practice and disgusting lifestyle that Steve lives. Remember, he said he doesn't eat animals. He was being very specific. He doesn't eat animals, but he does eat human. So Noah is stuck, completely helpless in this room, with her offender coming in and chatting her up every 30 minutes, and she has to pretend to be interested in what he's doing. She even goes to the extent of being curious of what it tastes like, trying to get on his good side as much as she possibly can for another chance to exit this room. And as she's talking to him and showing interest in his lifestyle, Steve really did have a soft spot for her. He liked that she was interested. He allowed her to come up for dinner. He wanted to share how he lives with this girl that he sickly likes. So that night, the night after removing this girl's butt, he brought her to dinner and prepared her a human meal. And she had to sit there and try these dishes that he was serving to her. And these dishes were prepared with the meat of the girls that were in the rooms before her. So while Noah's at this dinner, she has to choke down this food and really convince him that he likes it, because she needs as much information about him as she could possibly get. So she would take a bite and then ask a question, trying to get some more information, like, when did you start doing this? When was the first time you tried this? And Steve told her that he tried it for the first time when he was 18, and he's been completely hooked ever since. And he spent his entire young adulthood harboring this horrible dark secret until he found this community that was just like him on the internet. And that's how he got into the business of selling this meat to wealthy people, because there was a market for it, and it just so happened this market tended to be very wealthy. And Noah did her absolute best to hide her disgust. She acted as if this is interesting and exciting, and what a niche market. This is so cool what you do. I want to know more about it. And one of the last things that she asked Steve before being escorted back to her room was, do you only eat women? And Steve's response was simple and grotesque. Yes, because women taste better. After that horrible news, she gets dismissed from dinner and gets escorted back to her room. And of course, right when Steve goes upstairs, she starts throwing up. She wants all of this out of her system. She is having a hard time even living with herself knowing that she ate that. So she tries to excrete all of it. But she knows that she just has to keep convincing Steve that she is interested and curious about his operation. And after a few days pass where she's still just being held captive, Steve comes down to her room and he brought her a gift. He brought her this extravagant pink dress. He really still liked her, and he wanted her to wear that dress to their second dinner because he wanted to share more dishes with her that night. And Noah has to go along with it. She simply has to. It's her only way of escaping this nightmarish situation. So at this next dinner, she's having a very hard time coping with the situation. So she starts basically chugging this wine that Steve is giving to her, and he takes that as an invitation for him to start chugging wine too. And she's like, okay, let's both get drunk. And remember, Steve has a sweet spot for Noah, and she's doing a fantastic job of convincing Steve that she might potentially still like him, and she might be into this lifestyle. And she's playing it up. She's eating another portion of another person's body, and they're eating and drinking, having a good time together. And now, instead of Noah having to dig for answers by asking questions, trying to get in some information, Steve is volunteering information and just goes, no, come check this out. I want you to see what's behind this painting. So he lifts this big painting off of his wall, and underneath it are a bunch of little cubicles of all the personal items of all the girls that he's abducted in the past. But Noah is looking into all these little squares and she can't find her stuff. And when she realizes that her stuff isn't here, she asks Steve, why isn't my stuff here? And he says, your stuff isn't here with the others. Your stuff is with me, implying that she is special and she has a special place in his heart. But then Noah, as she's scanning all of these items of all these various poor girls that were abducted by this man, she sees a phone case that's very familiar. She sees her best friend Molly's phone case. So it clicks to Noah that Molly must have been looking for her, and Steve must have also abducted Molly. So now she's not even just worried about saving herself, she's also worried about saving her friend. But she keeps it to herself initially. And they go back to the dinner table and they continue their disgusting dinner. And Noah starts picking up their performance a little bit. And she starts breaking down and sobbing, trying to get his sympathy. And Steve really liked her. So he starts to console her and he's asking her what's wrong. And she starts to tell Steve, she's really selling it at this point. She starts to tell Steve that she feels so awful that she doesn't feel awful. She's fully convincing Steve that she is sold on this lifestyle. She's okay with this. She likes this meat. She likes how beneficial it is, how financially beneficial it is. She's into it. And this is music to Steve's ears. He's loving this. This girl that he has a real thing for is really into what he does and has forgave him for taking her butt and is into eating human meat with him. And that's when he tells her, I knew you were just like me. I knew you were messed up too. With the sickest, most perverse satisfaction in his eyes. And after a couple minutes of consoling Noah, she starts to bring the performance down a little bit and tells Steve that she thinks that they should dance. This is something that they would do with each other before she really found out who Steve was, and she thought it would be a great idea to get him to loosen up even more. So they're dancing, Steve's having a good time, Noah's pretending to have a good time, and they're even being a little affectionate with each other. She's really trying to sell it. And she infers that we should probably head to the bedroom because she's trying to really get him vulnerable. So they get to the bedroom and Steve lays down on the bed and Noah goes to the bathroom to freshen up. So she comes out and she's really trying to sell this. She sees this as an opportunity, so she starts pushing the pace and things start to pick up intimately. And then Noah finally makes her move. She got Steve in a vulnerable situation and bit him somewhere that you should not be bitten, and she bit him hard, completely immobilizing him, getting an opportunity for her to flee the scene. So Steve is doubled over in pain. He's freaking out. Noah grabs his keys, locks him in his room, and starts going downstairs to where all the girls are being held to let them out as well. She finds the room with Molly. Molly's here. She gets her out and she starts apologizing profusely for getting her into this situation. She unlocks Peggy's door. She gets her out as well. And Peggy is just a sweet girl, the same girl that was being nice to Noah this entire time. She actually only has part of one of her legs because Steve had amputated part of it and sold it on the internet. And mind you, all of these girls are pretty injured. Noah doesn't have a butt. Peggy doesn't have a leg. And Molly doesn't have one of her breasts. They are all having a very hard time fleeing this scene and getting away from this man. They were just mutilated. So they only get back upstairs into the main floor of the house by the time Steve breaks out of his room and starts attacking them. But he's mainly focused on Noah. He's not even really worried about these other two girls. He's trying to get revenge for this girl that he loved betraying him. And even though Steve was seriously injured, and I mean seriously, he was still very handily throwing these girls around. He's a full-grown man. And he exercises quite a bit. He was a handful for these three girls, and he put a beating on them. They were hurting him. Don't get me wrong. They were taking dents out of his armor, but he was not stopping in his pursuit to take out Noah. And eventually, Steve gets through to Noah, and he's trying to strangle her until Molly saves the day by cracking him across the head with an item. And this causes him to fall backwards and hit his head again on this edge of this concrete structure. So he was out for a minute. So the girls felt like they won for a moment. This dude's out, we get to exit the house, but as they're trying to flee, they realize they're in the middle of nowhere in the woods. They have no idea which way to go or what to do. They have no options. They're looking at their phones, they don't even have service, they can't even call for help. But at least they're away from Steve at this point. But Steve was not dead, and he had regained consciousness, and they're trying to flee in the woods, and now Steve is pursuing them in the woods, but he's really only going after Noah. He also grabbed a firearm before pursuing them in the woods, so now it is twice as difficult to try to get away from this guy because he's running around the woods with a gun. And they're all hiding behind trees and trying to stay unseen, but then Noah's phone lights up, and Steve saw it light up, and this means that she has service, but Steve knows where she's at. And Noah is just hiding frozen, but Steve knows where she's at, so he starts marching over towards her, lifts his firearm, and right as he's about to shoot, Peggy and Molly attack him from behind. But they're getting the better of him this time. They got the jump on him. He already had a lot of damage, and he was not ready to take on 3 women. He lost his gun. Noah took the gun. He was immobilized on the ground. She lifts the gun and she tells him to smile for him one more time. And in that moment, Noah got the revenge for all the girls that Steve had mutilated in the past, and she finished the job. At that moment, they felt a little bit relieved, but they still felt vulnerable. They had to go and search some nearby shed, looking for some type of vehicle, anything that could help them. But once they got there, Noah realized that she had dropped her phone in the woods, and a phone is way better than any vehicle that they're going to find, so they had to split up, and Noah went back into the woods to get her phone. Molly didn't want her to go. She had the right instincts, to be honest, but Noah assured her that he's already dead. We're going to be fine. I'm just going to get my phone. Just stay here. I'll be right back. So Noah goes back to where she thinks that she dropped it. And after a few seconds searching for it, she finds it. But when she stands up and turns around to go back to Molly and Peggy, she sees another woman coming towards her who she's never seen in her life. And this woman is hysterically crying. And she's just saying things like, "Thank God it's over. Thank you so much." And just crying and sobbing. And Noah is so confused because she has no idea who this woman is. And she's like, "Oh, okay. Like, do you need some help?" She's going to try to assist this woman. And once they get close to each other, this woman starts choking her. And Noah's trying to fight her off, but she's so weak at this point, it's not making any difference. And she's starting to lose consciousness, and this woman is winning. And just when Noah thinks it's completely over for her, who saves the day? Molly comes up and cracks this woman across the head with a shovel. Obviously, when she hits her with the shovel, the woman falls off to the side, and Molly is continuing to attack this woman, and she's yelling at her as if she knows who this woman is, as if this lady has personally attacked Molly. And after the job's finished with her, Noah's like, "Hey, who was that?" And Molly goes, "That was Steve's wife." Yeah, that's right. Steve was married, and his wife was in on it with him. For her, the trade-off was fine. We're super rich, and you get to abduct women and sell their body parts. And I'm cool with that. And Molly knew that because when Noah went MIA, she started searching all over the internet for any sign of Steve. And she tracked down this woman's Facebook. And she showed up at this woman's house to give her a "hey girly" text in person, like, "Hey, your husband is with my friend." And Steve showed up while she was there. And as she was leaving, she called Noah's phone because she didn't believe them. And Noah's phone went off in Steve's pocket. Steve looked at Molly and said, "That's the worst mistake you've ever made," and knocked her out and brought her to where he was keeping Noah. So that's how Molly ended up in the same house as Noah. She tracked down Steve's wife, tracked down Steve, and just happened to also get abducted. But it was the best thing that could have happened because 2 is better than 1. If they didn't have each other in that situation, they never would have been able to take Steve out, let alone his wife. Noah hated dating. She hated dating Chad. She seemed to enjoy dating Steve, but she never thought that dating would lead her into human trafficking. And reminder, even if a date goes well, choose the bear. So on May 19th, this woman named Colleen decided to go visit one of her friends for their birthday. Colleen's friend lived in Northern California, while Colleen lived in Oregon, so they were about 400 miles away from each other. And she just decided that it would be a really sweet gesture for her to drive over to Northern California and go wish her friend a happy birthday, spend a little bit of time with her. It would be a really fun surprise. It's not too bad of a drive, and it just really excited Colleen. She really wanted to see her friend and make her friend feel special. And Colleen lived with her family up to this point. She wasn't even living by herself yet. She had a really close relationship with her parents. Colleen was a really sweet and happy girl, but if we're being totally honest, she lived a bit of a sheltered life up to that point. But she was 20 years old, so technically she's a woman and nobody could really tell her what to do and not do. She could make her own choices as an adult. And even though this was a pretty long trip, she felt up to it. She felt like she was a grown-up, she was ready to go. But instead of driving herself there, Colleen thought it would be a good idea to hitchhike because it was a common practice around that area and around that time in the 60s and 70s. It was super common to hitchhike then. It was nothing like it is now. Now everybody knows that that is just a good way to get into trouble. That's a good way to get hurt. That's a good way to run into bad people, and you just probably shouldn't do it. But at that time, it was a very free-spirited time in our country, and she just thought, I'm ready to take on this challenge. I'm gonna hitchhike to California. So she just packs a bag and starts walking, just putting her thumb up at cars that are driving by, and she's ready to start her journey to California. And her first couple of rides were just with a couple of truckers. And these truckers were pretty decent guys. They would just give her a ride to as far as they were going, and then once they got to their destination, she'd just hop into a different truck and go as far as they were going. So eventually she runs out of truckers. She can't find another trucker to take her to the next destination, so she just goes by the nearby road, puts her thumb up, and the first car that drives by that stops for her and slows down is a car filled with 5 men. And all of the guys seemed very friendly initially, but But Colleen didn't feel super comfortable with jumping in a car with 5 grown men. She was a 20-year-old woman hitchhiking by herself, and even though she was pretty outgoing for doing this in general, that's where she drew the line. A group of 5 guys, she didn't like the idea of hitchhiking with them. Most women today don't even want to be in the woods with one guy. They'd pick a bear instead. So 5 guys, imagine that. So Colleen decides to politely pass on their offer. She'll just catch the next ride. It's okay, guys. Just being as gentle as she possibly can about the situation. And the guys take it pretty well and they just drive off. And as that car is driving off, Colleen is just continuing to walk in that direction with her thumb up. And pretty quickly after, another car starts slowing down and pulls up. And this time, this car was filled with a family of 3. A husband, a wife, and their baby. This is much more ideal for Colleen. She's like, this is more like it. This is an ideal hitchhiking ride. This is just a small family, probably good people. They got a kid in the back. This is great. I'll hop into this one. So she hops in the back seat with this family and she's thanking them for stopping for her, asking them where they're going and telling them about herself. She just feels like this is a much more positive situation than the one before. And as they're driving, everything is going pretty well. But then Colleen starts to get this uneasy feeling, a feeling that she didn't get from the truckers beforehand, a feeling that she kind of got with the car full of men. This time it's coming in waves, much more intensely, even though she's with a small family. Colleen was getting creepy vibes from the husband, because every time she looked into the rearview mirror, the husband would be staring into the mirror, looking at her in the back seat. This creeped her out big time, but she didn't want to read too much into it. Like, the wife's here and they have a baby right here. Maybe he's just a little bit concerned that she's in the back seat with their baby and he's just keeping an eye on her. That's very likely. And eventually this family pulls into a convenience store to get some gas, and Colleen just uses the gas station bathroom. And while she's in that bathroom, for some reason, she is just getting this horrible feeling in her stomach that something is off with the situation. A voice in her head is telling her she needs to remove herself from this situation. There's a window right there. Jump out of that one. Get as far away from these people as you possibly can. But Colleen's trying to calm herself down. Like, why would she even think that? This is just a family. This is a husband, wife, and a baby. She's trying to console herself and just be like, no, just take this ride. Nothing's gonna happen. These are nice people. So she beats those thoughts down and then gets out of the bathroom and goes back to the car to continue this ride. So they start driving again. But as they continue to drive, the husband takes an odd turn that she wasn't expecting him to, and they turn into this very odd area. Colleen obviously doesn't want to act like a backseat driver. It's not like they're taxis. She's hitching a ride to wherever they're going, so she can't really be picky about it. But the husband noticed that Colleen was getting a little bit uneasy, and he goes and tells her that they just want to go sightseeing for a little bit. And Colleen is like, okay, I mean, it's your trip. I'll go with you. She's okay with that. She knew what she signed up for. She's hitchhiking, so she went with them. She assumed it would be pretty quick and they'd be back on the road in no time. So now they're headed down this dirt road in the middle of nowhere. And then eventually, the husband slows down and just turns off the engine of the car. And the wife gets out of the car, she reaches in, she grabs her baby, and they just start walking around. But all of a sudden, Colleen finds herself with a knife pointed at her neck from the husband. And he commanded her to put her hands over her head and then asked her, are you planning on doing everything that I say? Colleen obviously says, yes, absolutely. You have a knife an inch away from my neck. I'm probably going to do whatever you're going to say. And then the husband proceeds to handcuff her, blindfold her, and then gag her. And then after that, the husband decided to reveal his very sick creation. He grabbed this heavy wooden box that was insulated with some type of carpet material and put it on her head. It was so uncomfortable. It was basically a medieval torture device, and she felt like the neck hole was basically choking her. She couldn't hear or see anything. She was in total darkness. This thing was completely soundproof. Then the husband proceeded to cover her with some type of blanket or tarp, just so if you look into the car, you can't see her. And then she felt the car start to move again, so the wife and the baby must have been back in the car. Colleen couldn't understand why the wife is okay with this. Their baby is in the car, in the backseat with her. She couldn't understand how this woman was allowing this to happen. So they were driving for quite a while, and Colleen is just completely trapped. Can't see, can't hear, can't yell, but then eventually the car stops moving. She feels the engine turn on. And apparently they had made it back to the family's house. And once they were inside, the husband removed the box from her head, but she was still blindfolded and gagged. And then once they were in the house, the husband led her down the stairs and ordered her to stand on top of a wooden chest. Then he told her to hold her hands over her head, and he tied her wrists to the ceiling. He proceeded to remove all of Colleen's garments. And as he was doing it, even though Colleen is absolutely terrified, she's held captive, she noticed that the husband was shaking. The man was trembling. And then once she was fully unclothed, he removed the chest from under her feet, and she was just hanging by her wrists. She was just kicking and screaming and freaking out, but she could hear the husband, and the husband goes, go ahead and scream. And then he got a little bit more serious and he said, I cut the vocal cords of all of my other captives because they wouldn't stop screaming. So go ahead and scream and make me do the same thing to you. Then he proceeded to hit her with something that was whip-like, and the louder that she would yell, the harder he would hit her. When he was finished hitting her with this whip-like object, she was just suspended there, listening to what is going on around her, and she could hear the husband and the wife making love at her feet. Colleen is in the worst experience of her entire life, but she couldn't help but think, how can there be people like this in this world? And even before she noticed the husband and wife doing the business, she could see through the bottom of her blindfold that there was magazines on the floor, and there was one particular magazine of a woman tied up just like this at her feet as well. So this was some sick kink. Eventually the husband untied her, because you can't just have somebody suspending from their hands for hours and hours and hours. Like, obviously it's going to do permanent damage. That might kill somebody. That might suffocate somebody. So she felt relief initially, but she could tell her body was still in a severe amount of pain. There was major damage done. But the relief was fleeting, because the husband immediately put her into a larger box that was very similar to the small box that was on her head. And this man put her into this big box, but also put the small box back on her head before putting her in the big box. She tried to scream, but to no avail. The husband could probably hear her a little bit, but there's 2 layers of boxes on her head and then around her body, but the husband could hear it a little bit, so he decides to come back and punish her for screaming by tying something around her chest, making it even harder to breathe for her, so she can't even scream because she's basically suffocating. Then the husband proceeds to leave Colleen in the box overnight, first of many nights she would spend in that box. And for the next 3 months, Colleen spent 23 hours a day in that box. And she would only be let out of the box to be abused or to be fed a little bit just to keep her alive, and then she would just be put right back into the box. And of course, her family is looking for her. She was a sheltered girl before this, but they have no idea where she is. She could be anywhere in between Colorado and California. So months and months go by, and Colleen is just stuck with this crazy family, stuck in this box. But as time went on, the family started to open up to her a little bit more, and she started to learn more about this family. She learned that the husband's name was Cameron and the wife's name was Janice. And that was all she knew about them for quite a while, because she was only out of the box for an hour, where they would spend torturing her, and then she'd just be put back in. So the only thing that she knew was their names. But one day, Cameron came down into the cellar and let Colleen out of the box. But then Cameron presented Colleen with a contract, and on this contract was basically asking her to sign off being his slave. And then he started to tell her about this organization called The Company. It was supposedly a huge organization that specialized in slave trading or human trafficking. And he told her that this company knew everything about her. They knew about her, they knew about this house, they knew about her family, and if Colleen tried to escape, the company would come after Colleen and her family. And this really scared Colleen. Like I said, she was a little bit sheltered before this horrible traumatic situation. Now she's being presented this contract and this whole idea about this company that has been tracking her and knows everything about her, and here's a contract to sign yourself off as a slave after 3 months in isolation. Basically, she's losing her mind. Now she's being presented with this. She doesn't know what to believe, and she's so scared that she just believes it. She felt so helpless and powerless that she signed the contract, and she thought it actually meant she was signing herself off as a slave. But now that she had signed this contract, she didn't have to be in the box all day. She was allowed to be out of the box during the day, and she would do all of the housework for Janice. She would do the cleaning, the cooking, everything. She was acting as if she was her slave. And whenever Cameron would come home from whatever he was doing, he would enter the front door, close it behind him, and yell, "Attention." And Colleen would have to remove all of her clothing and run to the doorway. She would then have to put her arms over her head in that same position that he put her in the first day, and she would say, "Yes, sir." Then he would strike her and then go on about his day, but he would do this every single time. And after a while of brainwashing and sadistic attention drills, they both told Colleen that Janice was also a slave, and Cameron had saved her from the company by marrying her. Also, completely not true. They completely brainwashed Colleen into believing that this organization was real. And this idea of this overarching company being out there if Colleen tries to escape, it just diminished any hope she had of escaping. And from the outside looking in, everybody that knew Cameron and Janice just thought they were ordinary people that kept to themselves. They had no idea the horrors that were going on inside of their house. There wasn't anything about these people that made them stand out to anybody. Nobody was suspicious. But it's very important to know the dynamic of the relationship between Cameron and Janice. They met when they were teenagers, and Janice wasn't even allowed to date boys. But somehow Cameron had manipulated Janice's father into letting Cameron take Janice out on a date. And Cameron realized immediately that he could control Janice however he wanted. Cameron would proceed to enact his fantasies and desires on Janice, even though she wasn't comfortable with it, but he was able to manipulate her into letting him do whatever he wanted, because apparently the love and affection that Cameron would show Janice after she would let him do whatever he wanted was exactly what Janice wanted her whole life. So she felt like, if I just let him do this, he'll treat me right. But to Cameron, the vibe of their relationship, the relationship between Cameron and Janice was, I'm Cameron and I own Janice. And Janice was only okay with it because of the love bombing that Cameron would give her after she acted like, yeah, you own me. And this toxic relationship eventually evolved into a very toxic marriage. So for years, Janice would be the one that would fulfill all of Cameron's horrible fantasies. But eventually, Janice got a little bit sick of it, and they had a talk. They both agreed that Cameron would be allowed to find a woman to enact all of his fantasies with. But the only rule was that he wasn't allowed to be intimate with the women. He was only allowed to abuse them. About after 9 months of Colleen being stuck with this horrible family, Janice started to notice that Cameron was spending a lot of time with Colleen. Janice attempted to test Cameron's loyalty to her by telling Cameron that he was allowed to be intimate with Colleen, who they renamed Kay, by the way. They gave this girl a completely new name. She is now known as Kay. So Janice had finally given Cameron permission to do the thing that she had always drawn the line at. And she thought that Cameron would be like, absolutely not. Gross. That's not in our agreement. I love you. I draw the line there too. But that's not what Cameron did. Cameron is a little weasel. He did the opposite of what Janice was expecting. He ran straight to the basement and didn't wait a millisecond before he started being intimate with Colleen. He literally ran. The moment her sentence ended, he turned around and ran. And Janice was completely heartbroken about that. She couldn't believe him. She couldn't believe the way he dropped everything that he was doing and sprinted downstairs to jump over the line that she had always drawn. She was so disappointed in him. She was so upset. She immediately let him know, I'm heartbroken right now. And he's acting like, what? You told me I could do it. But this wasn't the breaking point in their relationship. They got through it. And eventually they bought land and they moved into a trailer on this land. And since they no longer had a cellar to hide Colleen, they had to find a different place to hide her. And Cameron, that sick freak, bought a massive waterbed and made a contraption under their waterbed where Colleen was meant to sleep. So for years, she spent the majority of her days sleeping in that box under their waterbed. She slept under this couple that kidnapped her and convinced her that she was a slave and she couldn't leave because a company. And the same routine happened here. She was only allowed to cook or clean and she was Cameron's slave. But over time, Janice started to become very jealous of Colleen because Cameron wanted to spend all of his time with her. And the whole time, Colleen could tell that Janice didn't like her. She could tell that Janice did not want her around. She wanted Colleen to leave. But for some weird reason, she just kept going along with it. Janice kept bending to Cameron's will and they just kept Colleen around as this slave. So now, after 2.5 years of being stuck with this weird family, Cameron comes to Colleen and goes, I have a present for you. You're allowed to call your family. And naturally, Cameron briefs this girl on what she's allowed to say and what she's not allowed to say. She is only allowed to tell her parents, I'm happy, I'm in love, and that's it. And if she says that she's in danger or that she needs help, the company's listening. And if you say anything like that, they're going to come for you, and more importantly, they're going to come for your family. And even though this conversation was being totally manipulated and totally controlled, Colleen was still so excited to speak to her family. She just wanted to hear her parents' voice. But her parents, obviously knowing their daughter well, haven't seen her in 2 years, were obviously worried sick about her, could tell that something was off. They could tell that she did not sound like herself. They were so happy that she was alive. They were so worried about her. They could tell she was not the happy young woman from when they last saw her. They were very concerned about this phone call. They did not like what they heard. They didn't even bother asking her why she disappeared or what she's been doing, where she is, because they were scared that it was going to push her further away. They started to blame themselves that their daughter ran away from them and didn't want to be with them. They just wanted to make sure that they'll hear from her again. They wanted Colleen to call them more often. So now Colleen is building even more trust with Cameron because she didn't out him on this phone call. She did exactly what he said. She told her parents, I'm good, I'm happy, I'm in love, I'm safe, I like where I'm living. She just made it seem like her life was fine. So Cameron is like, good job, slave. And Cameron trusted her. Colleen was completely compliant. She did everything he asked. And that's when Cameron started to give her privileges. He even let Colleen go jogging, go exercise out. He let her go get a job because he knew he had so much control over her that she would come back. But the agreement was, if she goes to get a job and she's socializing and she's out, she still has to give her entire paycheck to Cameron. And with this newfound freedom, she gets to go work full shifts. She has a job, she gets to go jog, she gets to be out in the world. And Colleen still is not leaving this sick man. And that just shows you how deeply powerful his manipulation was, because he wasn't just being emotionally manipulative, he was being physically abusive, brainwashing, torturing, and on top of that, being emotionally manipulative. The thought of leaving was so overwhelmingly terrifying to Colleen because she thought, if I leave, the company is coming after me. If I think Cameron could be bad, he talks about the company like he's scared of them. She had fully accepted that this is her new life and she just has to follow the guidelines, and then she gets the privilege to get a job and go on jogs. And then one day, after she's continued to prove to Cameron that she is completely loyal to him, he comes to her and says, hey, the company has approved visitation. You're allowed to go see your family, and I trust you. Just don't say anything's going on. Just say that everything's good and you're happy, but you're allowed to see your family. And Cameron goes with her to meet her family. And the entire drive there, he's telling her what she can and cannot say and reminding her that the company is listening. But he's about to go face to face with her family. But he decides to just drop her off for a couple hours before walking in with her. And he just drives around for a couple hours, does some other weird stuff that Cameron does. And then after she's spent some time with them alone, he comes back, and that's when he meets the family. And they immediately get a super weird vibe from him. Obviously, they were probably already getting weird vibes from their daughter. Like, man, she seems skittish. She seems like a scared animal, just dodging questions and being vague. She's probably acting so off, unrecognizable from the girl that they know. And then this weird guy comes back, and they're probably like, there's something off with him. And these parents are saying that Cameron is acting so standoffish, and they're trying to get some information from him, asking where they live, just a little bit. Give me something. Let me know about your relationship a little bit. And he's giving them nothing. He's being so vague and so impersonal and just so out of character for somebody that's meeting their partner's parents for the first time. Because you got to remember, they showed up saying that they are engaged and in love and happy. And this guy is acting so bizarre. The only thing that he told the parents was that they were in the process of moving currently, but once they're settled into the new spot, they'll let the parents know where they're at. And as they're leaving, Colleen's mom just wanted a picture of her daughter and her fiance. She just wanted to snap a pic before they left, and she got one. But you could tell that Cameron was very uncomfortable with that, and they left almost immediately after. And then once they returned back to their trailer, it was like all the hard work and all the trust that Colleen built with Cameron was stripped away. Right after she saw her family, she was immediately put back into the box 23 hours a day for almost 3 years. He did this because he had to make sure that she didn't get too comfortable being able to see her family and being able to work. So things reverted back to how they were right at the beginning, where she had almost no time outside of the box. But this is where things start to get even worse. This wasn't enough for Cameron. Now he wanted a dungeon. He went to his wife Janice, and he had the nerve to tell his wife, I am not satisfied with having one woman slave. I want a dungeon, and I want multiple women in it. So now when Colleen would be let out of the box, her main focus was to help Cameron make this dungeon in a nearby shed that he had built. So now Cameron is spending more time with Colleen again because he needs help building his dungeon, and Janice starts to get pissed again. And on top of that, her husband wanted a plethora of women. So now Janice, who was already mad that he was spending this time with Colleen, is furious that he wants to spend even more time with women that are not her. So in that moment, Janice had a change of heart. Took you long enough, Janice. So she went to her pastor and told him some stuff. She told the pastor that her husband had 2 women, and the pastor said, that's not right, that's not natural. You should think about leaving him. So Janice goes straight from the church to the hotel that Colleen works at, and she does not hesitate. She just tells Colleen straight to her face everything. She just goes, everything about the company was a lie. They're not looking after you. You could leave whenever you want. You're not signed off to be a slave. This is what was really happening. Cameron was obsessed with his sick fantasies, and her trying to be a loving wife allowed him to get a different woman to fulfill them so their marriage wouldn't fall apart. And all of this was a complete lie. Colleen was completely shocked. This is a broken girl. She has been tortured, brainwashed, manipulated, and is basically a shell of a human at this point. And she cannot believe that she could have left at any point. She is still having trouble coming to terms. All of this was fabricated. She even struggled with the idea that the company wasn't real. She was fully convinced that it was. She thought that this might be a test. If I run away now, they actually might be after me. She wasn't fully convinced by Janice. But Colleen had been with Janice and Cameron for over 7 years at this point. So in that moment, she did have a bit of trust with Janice. She's known this woman as long as she's known Cameron. She's never said anything like this, so things are starting to add up to her. She starts to recall everything that she's been through, and she starts to come to terms with the fact that this was all an illusion. So Colleen leaves Janice, immediately buys a bus ticket, and calls her family on the way saying that she's coming home. But for some reason, right before the bus arrived, she called Cameron, and she told Cameron that she knew everything and she was leaving, like they're a teenage couple breaking up. And she told Cameron, "I'm never coming back and you'll never see me again." And this weasel of a man starts crying and sobbing and begging and just cannot console himself on the phone, begging Colleen to not leave. And she finally just hangs up. And she got on that bus and she got home to her family and was safe, but she lost 7 years of her life. And later, Janice actually went to the police and told them everything. And initially, the police didn't even believe her. They're like, "Yeah, okay, funny story. You're probably just pissed at your husband." But Janice swore that she was telling the truth, and she was like, you want proof? Go ahead and call this girl. Call Colleen. If you call Colleen, you'll believe me. So the police did. And Colleen was like, "Yeah, all true." So the investigators were like, "No way, this has to be a hoax." So they go to her house. They talk to Colleen for 2 full days, and she tells them everything. With that information, the cops are like, "Okay, let's go raid Janice and Cameron's trailer." They found the small box, the big box, tons of whips and chains. Everything that they said was there. And then Cameron was obviously arrested because so weird. But there was no proof that Colleen was held against her will. And then Janice does something so annoying. She starts talking to her husband again while he's in jail. And this manipulative weasel convinces Janice to destroy every single bit of evidence that was in that trailer. He goes, "Do this for me and stick by my side." And Janice goes and burns and destroys everything, all of the evidence, everything. And when the detectives finally go back to where they thought all of the evidence was going to be, because they needed more evidence about this case, everything was gone. Every morsel of evidence was turned into ash, and they had no proof that Colleen had this happen to her against her will. But one of the detectives found a magazine, and when he picked it up, a photo fell out of it. And he picked it up at first, but he couldn't tell exactly what it was because it was a photo negative. So he took it back to the station, and once they enlarged it and did the whole thing to actually make it a picture, they got a better look at it, and they realized that this was a photo of the contract that they had Colleen sign. And that's all they needed. Cameron was indicted and the trial began. And Cameron was obviously found guilty, and Janice even testified against him. A little bit of redemption, but a little bit too late, but she got immunity for it. And I guess for a long time, Janice thought that her relationship with her husband was normal because she had no other experience to compare it to. And the detectives finally decided that Janice was actually most likely completely manipulated, pretty innocent, and was actually just another victim of Cameron. So people like Cameron exist. That's why women choose the bear, because it's not just about the bear killing you. It's not just about if a man could kill you or a bear could kill you. It's about all the intricate, sadistic things that men will do just to fulfill some weird kink. Choose the bear. I'll give you guys a couple seconds. Really take in everything that you just heard. Which one did you think was the fake one? All 3 of them are absolutely ridiculous. All 3 of them could easily be the fake one, because sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. So I'll give it to you. 3, 2, 1. The doctor was the fake one. That is the story of a movie called Fresh. It's a really freaky, really scary movie, but that was the fake one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We've been having a lot of fun doing these. Please like and subscribe. We're doing these in between the first person point of view scary adventure stories, because those take quite a bit longer to make. So I hope you guys enjoy these, and I hope you guys continue tuning in. I hope you had fun, and we'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed this video. YouTube thinks that you would enjoy this video, so click on this video in the middle of the screen. Love ya.